Yeah.
Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are positively into the holiday week. Hope everybody's got the tree trimmed up. My cat and I have been running around the condo. My wife's in New Hampshire running around in the snow. We'll get her back in time for Christmas. Hopefully, everybody practices social distancing, stays safe here through this holiday season, and has a lovely, lovely Taharka Brothers eggnog ice cream dessert at some point over the weekend. Luke Jones joins us now. I am enjoying a little Rofo coffee here. It is a very leisurely move into the holiday when there was no nervousness or angst on the part of the Ravens on Sunday. Part of it, though, Luke, we're going to talk about Lamar. We're going to talk about running. We're going to talk about Hollywood Brown and the new offense, and here come the Giants. The defense is going to be the biggest factor in this, and you talk about kryptonite with Kansas City, and when they've lost to Kansas City, the defense is going to have to show up against Mahomes, against Josh Allen, against Ben Roethlisberger, to tackle Derrick Henry, who slapped some poor kid from the Lions practice squad on Sunday as well. But defensively, to see the Ravens step up and really sort of push the Jaguars around the way they're supposed to. As I said earlier, and I thought this was the tweet of the week, Luke, and it was not appreciated, so I'm going to give it again on the air here and see if anybody likes it. I said it was fair to say that Matt Judon was in high-speed pursuit of Gardner Minshew. Did you like that, or did you not? Did that one go over?
Yeah, it was good.
I thought it was good.
It was good, but I mean, as much as we look at the final score and we look at the fact that Lamar Jackson had 4 touchdowns and Marquise Brown had nearly 100 yards receiving, Dez Bryant catches a touchdown, Mark Andrews catches a touchdown. I mean, there's so many things you can point to.
Don't forget Tyree Phillips, because that was the highlight of the game.
There was that as well.
I'm having a cookie. I stopped at Royal Farms, had a cookie. Sorry.
But it's easy to forget that the Ravens turned the ball over on their first possession, and they're not that there was a sense of here we go again or oh my goodness, but it clearly was disappointing, especially after they were moving the ball pretty well, and Lamar Jackson gets a little greedy and throws a pick. And what did the defense do? Now, it helped that Jacksonville was backed up at their own 1-yard line, but they get a safety. And you see a defense that was without Marcus Peters, without Jimmy Smith. Calais Campbell, after an unimpressive pregame workout, was deactivated as the calf is still an issue for him. So you're talking about 3 really important players to that defense. One being up front against the Jacksonville running game that with James Robinson has been pretty good this year. I mean, one of the great stories of the league with him being a rookie free agent with over 1,000 rushing yards. Jacksonville runs the ball pretty well. So not having Calais Campbell's a big deal. And clearly not having 2 of your top 3 cornerbacks is a big deal when you look at the fact that DJ Chark is a former Pro Bowl receiver, and there is some talent in that group. Not saying they're a great wide receiver group, but there's talent there. So there were certainly some vulnerabilities that Jacksonville had the potential to take advantage of, you thought, but the Ravens defense was hearing none of that in the first half, and they just absolutely harassed Gardner Minshew, who was making his first start since late October. And, I mean, they sacked him 5 times over the course of the day. They pressured him. I think Pro Football Focus said they pressured him on half of his dropbacks in the first half, which is pretty darn good. So it really speaks to
they messed up his hair too, by the way.
That Wink Martindale. Yeah. But it really speaks to the aggressive nature that Wink Martindale had going into this game, maybe more so than normal. And the defense just absolutely smothered Jacksonville. I mean, their 5 drives in the first half ended in safety, turnover on downs, punt, turnover on downs, punt. I mean, doesn't get much better than that.
Don't forget that they punted with the kicker, too.
I think, yeah, they had 61 net yards in 29 offensive plays in the first half. So, I mean, doesn't get any better than that. Second half, were they as good? No. But when you're talking about a game that's 26-0 at halftime, you're going to let your foot off the gas a little bit, even you're not going to consciously do it, but it's tough to maintain that same edge. So, yeah, they gave up a couple scores in the second half, but you look at what they did in that first half, and, I mean, Patrick Queen was all over the field, and he's someone that I have not been as impressed with as a lot of people. I mean, I see the team website or the team Twitter account talk about him being defensive rookie of the year. I mean, no. I mean, he hasn't played nearly at that level, but he played really well on Sunday, and he played with confidence and is flying around the football. So that was good to see. There were plenty of positives to take away from the defense once you got beyond the fact that they were missing guys. And yeah, you need to have Marcus Peters back and healthy. So if him sitting out Sunday helps that for the Giants or for Cincinnati or for, more importantly, getting into the playoffs, and you have him available against Buffalo, against Tennessee, against Kansas City, then great. If holding Calais Campbell out helps get his calf right, then great. Jimmy Smith has been dealing with injuries all year, and it kind of just is what it is at this point. It's unfortunate. It's kind of the story of his career, as we know. But to see the defense perform the way they did, I mean, Yannick Ngakoue showing out against his old team, not a big surprise there. He was pumped, and you could see him hollering at the Jacksonville sideline after the strip sack. But it was just a really strong performance across the board for the defense, and that was good to see, considering some of the injuries. And let's face it, as much as we focused on the positives of scoring 47 points against the Browns, they gave up 42. And this is a defense that, really go back to the second half of that Philadelphia game, this is a defense that struggled to put teams away in the second half. I mean, going into Sunday, they had given up 20-plus points after halftime in 4 of their last 8 games. I mean, that's not good. That's not finishing football games. And we saw them blow a 2-score lead against Pittsburgh back coming off the bye. We saw them blow a 2-score lead against Tennessee. So they've had some games in hand that the defense then let it go. So for the defense to play the way they did, and again, I'll keep coming back to it. I get it. It's, quote, only Jacksonville. I understand that. But for the defense to play the way they did, given some of the guys that were down on Sunday, you have to be pleased with that. And another sign of this team kind of finding the best version of itself late in the season here, which is what you want.
Well, you mentioned him getting after the quarterback, and that's nice. But the backside and the health of the backside, had they been playing Buffalo on Sunday, had they been playing Kansas City on Sunday,
sure.
had they been playing Oakland or Indianapolis, anybody that can throw the ball a little bit or wants to throw the ball a little bit or has a quarterback that can read a defense and throw the ball a little bit, they'd be in trouble. And it really is a fascinating year, bro, as I red zoned it out again. I've been on the couch the last 10 weeks, so it has entered Eddie Feigner land to me a little bit, watching some of these teams run around and even the Jets winning and sort of the weirdness of the league and COVID and who's down the morning of a game and Jameis Winston can't play and Drew Brees is trying to play and can't play. And all of that being said, for the weirdness of all of it, the secondary part of this and the health and who's going to be on the field for every team in January, still pretty much up in the air as we're here Christmas week, because this year's unlike any other year where there's a plague running around that could get Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, but that's been understood all year. I mean, that's just going to be there. I mean, I can't predict who potentially could have a COVID outbreak in the second week of January, but it could be somebody. So, yeah, that's always the caveat for this season. And the weirdness that we've seen, we saw it in Major League Baseball with the Marlins early in the year, and look at how they ended up making the playoffs in this weird format that we saw. But we've seen Tennessee recover from their outbreak and play really at a high level down the stretch. We've seen the same with the Ravens now with 3 straight wins. So you never know about that, but I mean, there's always attrition in terms of injuries. You mentioned Drew Brees. I mean, you're going to have some of that. But for the Ravens, I mean, you have to be concerned looking in their secondary. And that's kind of been the story all year. From the time that Tavon Young went down in week 2, they've had so many nagging injuries. I mean, Jimmy Smith has played through probably a half dozen different ailments. But we've seen it over the last 6 weeks get to the point where he's not able to play through them, and he's having.
And now he's a 30-something guy trying to play through.
Well, sure, and that's the thing. Hurt guys stay hurt, right? I mean, and I say that with no disrespect to Jimmy Smith, who's played in the league 10 years. He's had a nice career. Did he ever become the multi-time Pro Bowl corner the Ravens thought he could be? No. And the big reason why is the injuries, because when he's stayed healthy, he plays at that level or near it anyway. But one, you mentioned it's good that they weren't going up against one of those types of offenses. Well, they didn't. And the good news is that gave them a chance to probably be a little more conservative. I don't think Marcus Peters could have gone anyway. I mean, he didn't practice all week. Jimmy Smith was ruled out on Friday, so he clearly wasn't going to go. Calais Campbell, would he have gone against a tougher opponent? Probably, I would say, considering he did work out and he was hoping to give it a go against his former team. But when you're in a position that you can take care of business against a, quote, lesser team, and you give those guys an opportunity to get off their feet, so to speak, you're hoping that that pays some dividends. And all right, do they need those guys desperately against the Giants? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, they need to win the game regardless, but you are hoping that some of these guys dealing with this now, you're trying to get them right, because to your point, I mean, even if we have acknowledged their Super Bowl aspirations taking a major hit with some of the injuries they've had, there's still an expectation of, if you get in, I want to see this team at least advance to the divisional round, right? I mean, another first round exit. Are we really looking at this season as something that you're excited about? No, I think there's disappointment there. So wherever the bar is at this point, and look, that's going to vary for everyone. And once you get in, who knows what's going to happen. But if you are going to make a run, you do need some of these guys that I mentioned getting right. And you really saw the impact it had on their game day roster. I mean, normally we're talking about a game like that, you would say, okay, James Robinson runs the football so well. The Jaguars do like to run, despite the fact that they're trailing so often. You'd like to go a little bit heavier on the defensive line. And clearly they had to do that when Calais Campbell's then out of the picture for the day. So they needed numbers there. And considering how banged up they were at corner, I mentioned Marcus Peters and Jimmy Smith, but keep in mind, Tramon Williams, who was their third corner on Sunday, he was coming off of an injury that had cost him 2 games. Anthony Averett had an ankle injury creep up at the end of the week last week. Now, it was minor. He played, and he played pretty well overall. But you had a group of corners. Of that group, Marlon Humphrey was the only corner on the 53-man roster not on the injury report this past week. So it does speak to needing number. Yeah, he was shaking. You could tell he was hurting for a little while. Didn't come out and played through it, but they were in a position where, because of their numbers and their concerns at corner and on the defensive line, that's why Mark Ingram was a healthy scratch on Sunday. And we haven't talked too much about that, and it wasn't a big shock. I mean, I opined about that over the course of the week that we could see that happening. I mean, a veteran running back who gets 1 snap in the previous game and doesn't play special teams, boy, you're the last guy that's going to be active if you're activated. So
do you think he will be a guy they will pull out as a silver bullet in January? Like, to me, he's still a thought leader around there. We don't have big trust and all that stuff going on. And they talk so much about Dez Bryant, and Dez Bryant talked about him, that at some point when they circle the wagons, 2 weeks from now, they're going to win these games. They're going to circle the wagons. It's going to be Jimmy Smith, who's got a ring, Calais Campbell. It's going to be these veteran Dez Bryant, these guys that are like trying to get a ring, and like Eric Weddle was at the end, like Matt Burke was at the end, like any of these hanger-oner 30-year-old guys who've got a lot of money in the bank, right? That they've got their pelts in the professional way. They've gotten their second or third contract. They want to win. And the only thing that matters is January 9th or 10th. How are we going to play when we get to Pittsburgh, to Buffalo, to Kansas City, Tennessee, wherever we're going to go? How are we going to play there? And to me, when I heard Mark Ingram scratch, it's not like, over the hill can't play or whatever. I'm like, I bet they'll get 12 carries out of him on a brutally cold day in Buffalo and feel like he's not going to be the guy that's going to fumble the ball. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's washed up and we're in Joe Flacco land 2 years ago where they want to get rid of him and they like having him around for the spirit. But I don't know. I haven't seen enough of him to think like he stinks. I mean, they haven't brought him out really much.
Well, he's been their third best running back. I mean, it's that simple. J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards have been better than him. And then when you throw Lamar Jackson into that conversation, who runs the ball a lot, I mean, there's one football. This is what I talked about the night that they drafted J.K. Dobbins. I didn't dislike the pick, but I did very much express not even as much a concern as just an acknowledgement of the reality of there's one football. And
well, the reality is the night they draft him, you say if Eric DeCosta is putting his stones out on a second-round pick for a running back, that this guy's better than Ingram right now, right? Like that's the way they saw it, right?
I think it was much more about the future in that case. I think it was just such good value compared to what they viewed him to be, which, I mean, they said a late first-round grade. Whether that's true or not, they clearly thought highly of him. I don't think it was so much that they thought he was so much better than Mark Ingram at the time. Mark Ingram was a Pro Bowl running back last year. But I think they thought this is our guy that can be our running back of the future and will be our guy in 2021 through 2023. And that's important, especially when you're talking about knowing you're going to be giving your quarterback upwards of $40 million a year, whatever it's going to end up being.
How about putting this kid around him? In the same room with him?
Yeah, I mean – Sure. Yeah, I mean, look. I mean, it's very simple. I mean, and I don't view Mark Ingram as a silver bullet, like a secret weapon, as much as he's a really good insurance policy at this point. I think he can still play some, but J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards have proven to be better throughout the course of the season. And as much as you and I talked in a previous conversation about what's changed for this offense, we have seen them go, instead of trying to feed all of these running backs, and as much as I think the conversation as far as getting into a rhythm, I think that can be overrated at times. I do think there's something to it, and I think there was something to the idea of you saw J.K. Dobbins run the ball well, and then he's coming out of the game right away. And then Gus Edwards comes in, and he runs the ball well, and he's coming out of the game right away. And then Mark Ingram wasn't running the ball as well. I mean, look at the numbers. He hasn't been as good as those guys. So they've streamlined it a little bit. And now you have two running backs handling the load. Lamar Jackson's running a little more than he had been earlier in the season, so that's a factor as well. You only have so many guys that you can give the football to. So I do think, and you did mention this, I thought it was interesting to note, J.K. Dobbins did fumble on Sunday. Now, it wasn't disastrous, anything like that. Something to keep in the back of your mind. We know John Harbaugh and how he feels about guys who put the ball on the turf. So that is something to keep in mind. But as for Mark Ingram, and I thought it was interesting because you eventually mentioned Joe Flacco 2 years ago. And at this time 2 years ago, you and I were both talking about the possibility of Flacco making plays for this team in the postseason. Lamar gets hurt at some point. Whatever. We were talking about hypotheticals at that point.
I think Mark would have put Flacco in there. He'd come back, and we never heard of Lamar again. No, you don't. You don't want that phone call. Okay, I'll get that
not so
call.
Much. But I do think it's similar in the way that you're counting on Mark Ingram to be professional about it, and to this point, everything we understand, he has been, and to be ready, because they're one injury away from J.K. Dobbins or to Gus Edwards, that Mark Ingram is getting 10 carries a game again. So he has to be ready. I don't think it's a case where they're, quote, saving him for the postseason. I do think it's a case where
he wasn't healthy, right, for a period of time. So, getting him fully healthy, to your point, measuring a 30-year-old version of him who might not have been right out there with a team that wasn't all that right 6 weeks ago. And look, you've already stood up and said he's a Pro Bowl or he's coming off Pro Bowl year. I just think we haven't heard the end of him. And I said that about Flacco 2 years ago, and we didn't hear the end of Flacco. He never walked out on the field against the Chargers. Who knows? We'll never know, right? I guess that's the point of the phone call I just made in. But in the case of Ingram, I feel like there's a huge leadership thing there. There's a point where he's going to get the football a little bit next month. I just feel that way, and I feel like part of it will be that he'll be healthier on January 9th, having not been banged around on December 9th.
It's possible. I'm not going to rule it out. I don't, to be very clear, I don't think Mark Ingram is done as an NFL player, but when you're the third best running back on your roster, which is what he's been this year, J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards have been better than
Lamar,
him.
make him one.
And if you want to count Lamar, then he's fourth. So you have that. He doesn't play special teams. And, oh, yeah, you needed bodies at corner and on the defensive line on Sunday. That's why he was a healthy scratch. I mean, that's why that's why we're having that conversation. Now, to your point, 3 weeks from now, they're in the postseason. They're healthier in the secondary. Calais Campbell is feeling 100%. They're going up against a team that, say it's Pittsburgh. You're not loading up on defensive linemen against Pittsburgh because they can't run the football. Ben Roethlisberger is going to throw 47 times. So you're going to want a little more in the secondary there. So if you're in a position where you don't have these game day depth needs like the Ravens did on Sunday, then yeah, Mark Ingram can be active, and he might be the guy that serves as the finisher if you're up 10 points in Pittsburgh on the second weekend in January, whenever it ends up being, if they cross paths, and he's carrying the football because you trust him a little bit more in that way. And maybe J.K. Dobbins puts the ball on the ground again between now and then, and you're worried about that in the back of your mind. But as it stands right now, I mean, I think it's very clearly just it's cut and dried, and looking at who's been more effective running the football, and it's been those other two running backs, and then factoring in Lamar running the ball more than he was earlier in the season. And I come back to my original point. There's only one football to go around. So it's unfortunate. I definitely think it's an awkward position for them to be. I will say this. The writing is very clearly on the wall that barring a catastrophic injury to someone else, Mark Ingram's not going to be back on this team next year. I think that's become clear in the same way we talked about that with Joe Flacco 2 years ago at this point in the season. But does he have a moment? Does he have a time where he's still going to contribute for them on the field? Time will tell. If all things stay as they are right now in terms of health and in terms of productivity, then he might find himself continuing to be a healthy scratch. But to be clear, they're not cutting him or anything like that. I mean, that would be foolish to do that, short of him becoming a malcontent, which I just don't think you're going to see that. You even saw, if you saw some of the mic'd up segments from the Cleveland game, and he played one snap. He played the first play against the Browns and didn't play again after that. And you still saw a guy who was very vocal and fired up and happy for his teammates and happy for his team. So he very well could have a moment at some point. He could see the ball again, but where it stands right now, he's just, if you're not one of the top two running backs and you don't play special teams like Justice Hill does, then if you have some roster needs on game day, you're going to be on the outside looking in. That's just reality.
We are going to be hanging out through the holiday here. We're going to be eating some Taharka Brothers eggnog ice cream. My wife said, get the peppermint bark. Tell Steve and Sean you want the peppermint bark. If you haven't heard, our friends at Taharka Brothers have become employee-owned. We had a huge segment about that up at Baltimore Positive. You can now find all of our Baltimore Positive podcasts, including Luke and I, out at the Baltimore Positive app and any of the app stores. You can download the Stitcher, the Google the Apple iTunes, the Google Play, any of those places where you get your podcast, where you get Joe Rogan or Howard Stern. You can get us as well as out at BaltimorePositive.com. Luke, I hope you have a great holiday, with the family. I know it's been difficult here through COVID. I know your sister's making little Luke nephews and nieces and whatnot. So I hope you guys have a beautiful holiday. I noticed that the National Football League's going to make this holiday really special by playing one game for us on Friday, 3 on Saturday, and we get to watch the lowly Giants on Sunday. So if nothing else, with my ham and my eggnog and all of my sponsorable wares around here, including all the leftover crab cakes I have in the kitchen, we'll have a lot of football this week, right?
Yeah, no question. And no shortage of games for Ravens fans to take a lot of interest in. I mean, you have Tennessee at Green Bay, which is just going to should be a really good football game in general, but there is that scenario. The Titans play at Green Bay at Houston. You're talking about a tough opponent on the road and then a divisional opponent on the road, which we know you can't just assume. So Tennessee loses 2 games, then that's a path for the Ravens.
This is the time to hate on all the other teams in the AFC. This is a time to scoreboard watch, right?
Well, I'm about to tell you something that's very difficult, or maybe it's not when you kind of think about it. But I mentioned Tennessee. Cleveland, of course, is at the Jets. I don't know if you're going to be getting much help there, but who knows? Maybe the Jets have a 2-game winning streak in their in their bags, so to speak. Miami at Las Vegas. We've seen the Raiders kind of fall apart here. They're not in this anymore. Mathematically, I think they still have a minuscule chance, but they're out of it. But the interesting game for me, other than obviously the Ravens needing to take care of business against the Giants, Indianapolis at Pittsburgh. When you look at how this plays out, Ravens fans rooting for the Steelers to beat Indianapolis because that could be the loss. If the Colts lose that game, puts the Ravens in the field. But
I
that
found my
involves rooting
ticket
for the
stub from the
Steelers.
Captain Comeback game, the AFC Championship game, back when
Yeah.
John's brother, Jimmy, little brother Jimmy, was running around up there. So when I hear Colts at Pittsburgh, I'm thinking, man, that feels like a minute ago. That was the last official act that ever happened in the AFC before the Ravens were in the league. How about that? Poor Marvin.
Yeah, but let some Festivus weirdness for you because hey, it's 2020, right?
Say Ted Marchibroda and Tony Siragusa. Say that. Just say those names.
Ted Marchibroda and Tony Siragusa. But Pittsburgh against Indy in Week 16, and they go to Cleveland Week 17. When you look at the games that remain, and we've already talked about it, the Ravens need a loss from Cleveland, Indy, or Miami, and I think they're going to get that. I'm very confident they're going to get that somewhere. But it is interesting to note that the Steelers play Indianapolis in Week 16. They play Cleveland in Week 17. So how ironic would it be if the Ravens get the help that they need from the Pittsburgh Steelers? So what a world we're living in. 2020, right?
Well, yeah, and, at least we have football, right? I mean, through this whole COVID thing and
no
the holidays, and a lot of folks aren't going to have grandmom over or kids over or loved ones over. We got an elbow bump. I went to Costas the other night to pick up some crab cakes, and, I want to hug Pete, and Santa Claus is there buying me half a Guinness, and I'm like, I got to drive, just keep it to 6 ounces or less. And, I miss hugging people. And,
Sure.
we're building this new website and doing all this stuff. I miss being at the games. I mean, Scott Norton, my dear Getty Lee a partner, sent me a bunch of pictures of my seat up in the upper deck. And, at some point we're going to turn the corner on this, get back to some normalcy. But at least for one weekend, we can hate on the Indianapolis Colts and feel good about it, right?
Yeah, of course. No
all
question
right,
about it. I mean, there's plenty of rooting interests. And, I'll also throw this out there. Week 16, the Ravens needing to beat the New York Giants in Baltimore. I seem to remember a scenario 8 years ago where that same situation was there, and the Ravens needed to beat the New York Giants, and they did. And they got in the playoffs as a result. And, well, I seem to remember several weeks later something good happening in New Orleans. So maybe a little bit of a serendipity there. Who knows? But certainly a game that the Ravens need to win, a game they should win, and go out and take care of business and hope you get that necessary help that did not come on Sunday, unfortunately.
Hold on. Help is on the way. More than a Little River Band song. You can find me, Ness, at BaltimorePositive.com. That's a new email address. You can still find Luke at WNST.net, as well as at Baltimore Luke, out on Twitter and Facebook and social media all week long as we prepare with a cup of eggnog to Harker Brothers Eggnog ice cream, hopefully, with that discount if you want to use it before the holidays. I hope everybody has a great holiday out there. Luke, take care, man. I will. We'll get together a little later on in the week. Maybe talk some New York Football Giants. I may fire up the videotape of January 28th, 2001. That was my favorite Giants game. Of course, my dad had some other favorites back in 58, 59, and the anniversary of that coming up next week too. So it might be time to break out some Lenny Moore and Smarty Donovan next week. What do you think of that?
Sounds great. Merry Christmas, everyone. Happy holidays, and enjoy this Festivus season.
I may find my Ordell Bracey, sit down with him, just to honor my dad. And I don't mean the flaming pit. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Enjoy your eggnog, your ice cream, and stay with us.